Eating disorder recovery looks different for everybody. However, the road to recovery is usually paved with similar milestones or obstacles, which is why sharing your experience can help light the way for those still on their journey. The moment-to-moment demands of recovery can be strenuous, and there is not immediate gratification for making the right decision, which is why people usually do not realize that they are experiencing these milestones in the moment. It is only upon reflection that a person recognizes the magnitude of their decisions and can be grateful for their resilience. Hence the term, hindsight is 2020.
I was sitting in front of my job with my mom. She had driven me to work that morning. It would have been dangerous for me to get on the road. I hadn't gotten any sleep, and I spent a lot of mornings like that, be up all night, and then I would be driving to work crying. At this time, my mom was sitting in the car with me, and I was trying to pull myself together, and I just couldn't do it. She couldn't say anything to make me feel better. And I wanted so badly to just go back home, but I knew if I went back home, I would be just as miserable as I was at work. So in that moment, it really became less about the eating disorder and more about not wanting to feel like that anymore. I said to my mom, maybe I should go to treatment. It was brought up in the past, but I brushed it off and said, no, that's not something I want to do. I don't want to stop my life. But I realized that I wasn't really living a life anyway. And I had a long road ahead of me at that point, but I think that was the moment that I said, okay, I'll accept help. I need to do more.
I was just at the lowest point I could have been. I was at the end of my rope. And I had been struggling for 13 years and had never gone to therapy or anything. And I started seeing a therapist who very strongly recommended that I seriously consider thinking about treatment. And that was a really scary thing to hear because I had never thought that that would be something that could happen for me or something that I could handle. I went home and did a little research, and I just in that moment thought, I want more. So I went for my intake evaluation, and the hardest part after that was to tell my friends and my family. My dog jumped in my lap. I'd like to think that he sensed something. Him just being there gave me the courage to just put it out there. Of course, I was met with nothing but support and love, and after that moment, a huge weight was lifted.
I had been going to treatment for 7 years until I finally started talking about it with my therapist. That day was nothing special. Nothing triggered me or made me want to start talking about it. I had just kind of come to the point where I was done. I was over relapsing. I knew I was still going to have them, but I wanted to kind of take my recovery in my own hands. That day, I guess, was 2 milestones in one. I opened up about my trauma, which I hadn't for so long, and I decided that recovery would be my thing. Part of going to treatment and part of seeing my therapist was my own motivation, but most of it was physically necessary or forced upon me by my parents, as I was a minor at the time. But opening up about this trauma really sparked that motivation inside of me to get better and to want to have a life outside of my eating disorder.
So while we were in treatment, I learned about body dysmorphia and body checking. One way to limit myself from body checking was to avoid mirrors. I was told that I wouldn't have to avoid mirrors forever, but do it for the time being and then we could reintegrate it. That was a valid suggestion, being that every time I looked in the mirror, I felt worse about myself. So I got in the habit of not changing in front of the mirror. When I got ready in the morning, I had a small face mirror that I used so that I wasn't staring at my body. And I remember there was one day, and I was washing my hands, and I looked up in the mirror and quickly looked away, because of course that was the habit. And then I did a double take, because I realized that my thought about my reflection wasn't negative, it was positive. I thought, wow, I look really pretty. I kind of smiled at that and thought, wow, that's new. But I let it go quickly, and I left the bathroom and I just went on with my day, because I didn't want to dwell on that. I didn't want to stare, because I knew if I thought about it any longer, I would twist it and I would find something to criticize. That was a moment where I realized that this is working. That, I am actually accepting my body and accepting the way that I look, and my self-talk is changing.
Another milestone in my recovery was understanding what it means when you hear that recovery is not black and white, because that's something that was very much repeated throughout treatment. That's really a hard thing to just understand until you've experienced it. So my experience was went out for dinner with a friend I had met while I was in recovery, and I shared something, pretty specific about like I'd been giving into some behaviors, and she was kind of like, that's not okay, like you're in denial, like that's not good. It was kind of a wake-up call for me, but in the same moment, everyone's struggle is different. Everyone's road to recovery looks different, and something that may be really alarming to someone else might just be somebody else's gray area. I wanted to be gentle with myself because I felt like I wasn't getting, that support and reassurance that I wanted, so I had to provide it for myself. Yes, maybe I shouldn't be giving into behaviors, just knowing that that's what I should be working away from, and then being able to take that and be open in therapy with it and not hiding it and harboring it, working through the slips, because they'll happen, but it's how you work through them that's important.
Okay, so this memory is me and my friend napping together. And the reason why it was so significant was because I remember that day I thought I would never have been able to do this in my eating disorder. I couldn't make plans spontaneously. Everything had to be planned ahead, and that was because when I was in my eating disorder, I would prepare to hang out, like restrict or work out. And if that day came and I didn't feel good about myself, I couldn't bring myself to see them. And I also couldn't be around them because I thought that me not being on would mean that they didn't like me anymore. I was so paranoid about, what others thought about me. Just the concept of doing something as spontaneous as having her come over just to nap. I mean, that meant that we didn't plan anything. She just came over, and then we just got tired and we fell asleep. That was early on in recovery, and from that moment, my relationships with my friends have just gotten better and better. They love me even when I'm sad. They love me even when I'm angry. I don't always have to be bubbly and happy. And what's more boring than napping with your friend? But yet I could do that now.
So another one of my milestones, 1 year anniversary of when I first went into treatment.
Another one of my milestones was 1 year without relapse.
Few months leading up to that day were really stressful with work. It was around the time of the holidays, some family things going on. That eating disorder voice was really, really strong and pervasive. So on the day of the anniversary, I just kind of felt like I hadn't really accomplished all that much. And then I found a quote on Instagram, and I was like, I'm gonna post this because I am proud of myself. I was in a completely different place than I was a year ago, and I just had put myself in my shoes from a year to that day, and I just couldn't believe how far I had come. And so I just really allowed myself to be proud, and that was a really defining moment for me to get my motivation back. Since then, I've really worked hard to try and keep my recovery as the forefront of my life.
Without sharing my trauma and without having my own motivation, the only thing getting me out of treatment was getting myself right back in. I always just wanted to kind of get back to where I was before, and I never really had emotional growth. So 1 year without relapse, in that year span, I was meeting with my therapist and actively working on several of my own battles and hardships. So many of those things leading to my eating disorder. That 1 year no relapse was a pivotal moment for me. I had never made it longer than a year. So after a 7-year battle, that 1 year was everything to me. And then when that year became a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, around January, which is when I started seeing my therapist, every year since has been very emotional for me and very reflective and nostalgic. I'll even visit treatment sometimes, and I'll pass by and I'll be able to look back and think like I've come a long way, and more ways than just my eating disorder.
When you go through recovery, you're taught that relapses and slips are part of the journey. I was really disappointed when I realized that I had to go back to treatment, because one thing I kept telling myself, I know what to do, why can't I do it? But it was during that experience that I realized being there the second time taught me new stuff. I gained new knowledge from it. Even if it was the same lessons that they were teaching, I was able to interpret it in a different way and kind of apply it to new areas of my life. And there's nothing to be disappointed about, because all I'm doing back in treatment is peeling back more layers of myself. It's essentially the same thing as going through heartbreak or struggling with your relationships or having financial problems. They teach you something, and when you come out of that dip, you have gained so much more knowledge about yourself. I am gonna mess up, so I don't have to fear it. I just have to remember that in those moments when it's happening, that I'm gonna learn something from it, that my life after this slip up, the turbulence, my life after it is gonna be better because I'm gonna know what to do for myself in the future.
About a year ago, I started coaching Girls on the Run, a running program for girls from 3rd grade to 8th grade. Each practice that we have involves a little bit of running, but it's mainly a lesson about confidence and body image and positivity, working with others and building each other up. When it comes to the body image and confidence and self-esteem aspect, I don't think I could have ever seen myself preaching to a bunch of kids who I remember at the time when I was their age. I wasn't having any of that. So even now, my 21, 22-year-old self, without recovery and without working on it day to day, every single morning, every single hour, reminding myself about confidence and self-esteem, I couldn't be a coach. I couldn't help them through their day-to-days at school and practices and things like that.